All right, today we're going to review over graphing linear equations, which is section 8.5. This is probably one of my favorite things to do in math, so you guys are really in for a treat here. Okay, so graphing linear equations. Okay, now there's specific steps that we can take to graph linear equations, and it works for every equation. Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to list out these steps. And what I would like for you to do is have these in front of you during your notes. And then tonight, whenever you get started on your homework, have them in front of you and follow them step by step. And do not skip any steps, especially this first one here. Okay, this first one, we're going to put some stars next to it because it's the one that always gets skipped, but it's probably the most important. Okay, so if we're given an equation and we want to graph it, the first thing that we have to do is we have to make sure it's in the correct form. So we're going to make sure the equation is in slope-intercept form, or we can just say y equals mx plus b. Okay, so the main thing here is the equation has to be in y equals. That's the big idea. Okay, now just a reminder, what these letters mean. M is my slope, which is what we concentrated on yesterday. B is my y-intercept, or where my line crosses the y-axis. So we have to do that first. Make sure the equation is in y equals mx plus b. Okay, after that, we're going to go through and we're going to identify the slope and y-intercept. So we're going to say this is my m, or my slope, and this is my b, my y-intercept. Okay, once we say m equals and b equals, we're going to plot the y-intercept first. Okay, so that b, we're going to plot it, and as a point, it's going to be 0, comma b. Okay, so if it's easier to think of it as a point as opposed to just the y-intercept, whatever that number is, it's going to be 0, comma b. So if my equation is y equals 2x plus 1, y equals 2x plus 1, my b is this 1, so my y-intercept would be 0, comma 1. So that's what I mean by that b, okay? So it's in y equals, we're going to identify the slope and the y-intercept, and then once we plot the y-intercept, we need 2 points to make a line. So to make my second point, we're going to use the slope, which remember from yesterday is rise over run, to plot a second point. Okay. And then the hard part's done, because after that we are just going to connect the points and then make sure to include the arrows. Okay, so if you just want to draw a picture, those arrows are important because these lines go on and on and on forever, and if you don't draw the arrows, it is saying that that line only goes for a certain period of time, which is not true. So make sure you include those arrows. Okay, so make sure you have your steps written down. Keep those in front of you during our examples, and we're going to go through them step by step for every equation. And remember, we do not want to skip that first one. Okay, so we're going to go through just a few examples. Okay, our first one. Our line will look like y equals 3/5 x plus 2. Okay, step number 1, the one that we are not going to skip ever, make sure it's in y equals. So what I mean by that is y has to be all by itself on one side of the equal sign, which I noticed that it is. So that step 1 is already done. Sometimes it will be done, but we always need to check. So step 2, we need to identify the slope and the y-intercept. So since it's already in y equals mx plus b, the coefficient in front of x is my slope. So my slope for this line is 3/5, or what that means, I'm going to rise 3, run 5. And my y-intercept is whatever's added or subtracted. So this one, my y-intercept is 2, which as a point is 0, comma 2. Okay, so I identified my slope, I identified my y-intercept. Now I need to plot my y-intercept. Step 3 says plot your y-intercept. So that is the point 0, comma 2. This is where my line crosses the y-axis at 0, comma 2. Okay, and then I'm going to use my slope to plot my second point. Now this is the very important part. Using your slope from your y-intercept. So from this 0, 2, my slope tells me to rise 3 and run 5. Okay, so from my y-intercept, I'm going to rise 3, run 5. Okay, so rise 3, run 5, plot your second point, and then don't forget the last one says we're going to connect our points. Make sure to include our arrows. And there's our line. Okay, for our second one, we have y equals 2x plus 1. Okay, step 1, make sure it's in y equals. It already is, so step 1's already done for me. Then I need to identify my slope and my y-intercept. The slope is the coefficient in front of x, so this time it's 2, or I could say 2 over 1, because this means I'm going to rise 2, run 1. My y-intercept is this number added at the end or subtracted at the end. So my y-intercept is at 1, or if I want to write it as a point, it would be 0, 1. Okay, once I have those two pieces of information, I'm going to start by plotting my y-intercept. Okay, my y-intercept is 1, so I'm going to plot a point at 0, 1. Then I'm going to use my slope to plot my second point. Okay, my slope tells me to rise 2, run 1. Rise 2, run 1. We have our 2 points. We can connect our points, and don't forget about your arrows. So that would be my second line. Okay, keep moving forward. If I have y equals negative 2/5 x plus 3. Okay, it's already in y equals. Step 1's already done for me. Now I can identify my slope and my y-intercept. Okay, this time my slope is a negative number. So I have a negative 2/5, which means I'm going to rise negative 2, run 5. Okay, now whenever you have a negative, you either need to put the negative in the numerator or the denominator. For consistency purposes, I will always put the negative in the numerator unless there's a special circumstance. But so I always think rise negative 2. So instead of going up, I'm going to go down 2. Okay, and my y-intercept is 3, which as a point is 0, 3. Okay, so we're going to plot my y-intercept first. This time it is 0, 3. And then this time, my slope tells me to rise negative 2. So to rise negative 2, instead of going up, we're going to go down. And then I'm going to run positive 5. So we're still going to run to the right, plot our second point, and there we go. Notice that my line is sloping down. That should be, you should see that once you see that you have a negative slope. Your line should slope down like that. Okay, just a couple more. Alright, if I have 3x plus y equals 6. Okay, step 1, make sure it's in y equals. Okay, this time it's not in y equals. So to get it in y equals, I need to isolate this y, which means I need to get rid of this 3x. Okay, this is a positive 3x, so to get rid of a positive 3x, we're going to subtract 3x from both sides. So now my equation says y equals negative 3x plus 6. Okay, now it's in y equals. We can identify the slope and the y-intercept. My slope is negative 3, or we could say negative 3 over 1, which means I'm going to rise negative 3, run 1. My y-intercept is 6, or as a point, is 0, 6. Okay, and now I'm ready to graph my line. So just like with the other ones, we're going to start with a point, you start by plotting your y-intercept. This time it is at 0, 6. This time my slope tells me to rise negative 3. So I'm going to go down 3 and then I'm going to run 1. So rise -3, run 1. Once again, notice my slope was negative. My line slopes down. That should have been expected. Okay. This one could be a little trickier. If we have 3x minus 5y equals 10. Okay, now this one's not in y equals. So what we want to do first is I first want to isolate this 5y. So I need to get rid of this 3x. Okay, that is a positive 3x, right? So to get rid of a positive 3x, we're going to subtract 3x from both sides. On the left-hand side, I'm left with a negative 5y, and on the right-hand side, I have a negative 3x plus 10. Okay, it's still not in y equals, so I need to get rid of that negative 5. So if we divide both sides by a negative 5, you just have to be really careful on that right-hand side because you have to take the negative 3x divided by negative 5, and you have to take the 10 divided by negative 5. You have to divide everything by that negative 5. Okay, now I have my y equals. Okay, looking at the right-hand side, I have a negative 3x over a negative 5. I can't simplify the 3 over 5, but I have a negative over a negative, which hopefully you recognize just turns into a positive. So I have 3/5 x, and then I have a 10 divided by a negative 5. 10 divided by negative 5 just gives me a negative 2. Okay, now it's in y equals. The hard part is done, so I can identify my slope and my y-intercept. My slope is 3/5, which tells me I'm going to rise 3, run 5. My y-intercept is negative 2, which as a point would be 0, negative 2. Okay, so first start by plotting your y-intercept. And this time it is at 0, negative 2. And then my slope tells me I'm going to rise 3, run 5. Okay, so we're going to plot our second point, connect our dots, and we should be done. Okay, the last two examples are very, very special cases, and these can be very easily confused, but that's why we're putting them in your notes so you can consult them. Okay, so we have two different types of lines. I have y equals negative 2, and then let's say I have x equals 1. Okay, so if I look at this first one, I have y equals negative 2. It's already in y equals. Okay, so if I'm looking for my slope and my y-intercept, I notice that I don't have an x. Okay, if you recognize that there is no x if it is y equals a number, every single time your line is going to be a horizontal line every single time. So it's going to go straight across, and it's going to go through this point right here. So y equals negative 2, so on my y-axis it's going to be a horizontal line through negative 2 every single time. Okay, if it's y equals a number, if you don't see an x, it's going to be a horizontal line through whatever that number is. Okay, so looking at the x equals 1, if you notice that you have x equals a number, it's going to be almost the same thing, but instead of a horizontal line, it's going to be a vertical line. So it's going to go straight up and down. And this time, it's going to go through whatever that point is, but on the x-axis. So wherever x equals 1, you're going to have a vertical line. Okay, I know these are kind of easily confused, but if you look at this anywhere on this line, y equals 2, right? If this is my y equals 2, well, y equals 2 here, and here, and here, and here, and everywhere on that line, y equals 2. Same thing here on this line. Anywhere along that line, x equals 1. So you can always just double check if you forget. Okay. Alright, your homework for today is in section 8.5, which is on page 368, and you guys have 3 through 30. Okay, and they're just the problems in the right column. So it should be 10 questions. Okay, so the first problem is 3 and the last one's 30, and you have all the ones in between. There should be 2 other columns, but you are doing these ones. If you have questions, just ask, please.